Thank you, sir. All right, we had a couple weeks off, but the question we had 2 weeks ago, let's see if I can get to it here. All right, excuse me. Was it about the surgical procedure? All right. Upon which Bible character was performed a surgical operation with use of an anesthetic? What we got for that? Don't tell me I stumped y'all. Deacon Ballard, all right?
I would say when God did surgery on that.
Okay, all right.
You put him in a deep sleep.
Yeah. You might be on to something. Anybody got something else? Did anybody, now that he said that, how many people had Adam? You had it right there. You just wasn't sure about it, right? What were you saying? Did you say something? Anesthetic. Well, let's look at it and see. Let's look at Genesis, the second chapter, verse 21. Genesis, second chapter, verse 21. Let's see. Yeah. All right, Genesis 2:21.
And the Lord God caused the deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he took one of the ribs and broke his leg and said,
All right, so what we think on that? That qualify? What would make it an anesthetic? What is an anesthetic? So even though it may not have been a prescription form, it still accomplished the same goal, right? So that's what the book has. So that's the answer that we're going to roll with. So Deacon Bellady, you got that one right. But if somebody has something different, we can look at it and see. But it's pointing to the fact that God can do within himself what man has the wisdom now to do. He's always had the ability to do all these things, but he's given the man the wisdom to carry out the things that he already is capable of doing. That's kind of the thought behind it. All right, anybody have something different? All right. Absolutely. It's he did the first surgery too, and had a very successful surgery, I might say. So he knows what he's doing, and it's comforting to know that even when we have to go through medical procedures and whatnot, the great physician is still God, and he still is very capable of doing things that nobody else can do. All right. Anything else on that? All right. The next question here, talking about physician. Who told a doctor to heal himself? Who said, "Doctor, heal thyself"? Yep, there you go. Who told a doctor to heal himself, to say it that way? All right. I had us being ready to start talking about the synod tonight. So we did finish up a session in Presbytery. Is that correct? Is that correct? All right. All right, so on page 52, well, in my book it's 52, the section is 8.0, synod. All right. Was it 53 in the big book? So 52 in the small book, 53 in the big book. All right, before we get into it, which court, how many courts do we have? 3? 4. All right, so the synod is which court in number? It's the 3rd. All right, what's the first court? Second court? And then the 3rd court is synod. Absolutely. Okay. Somebody read 8.1. All right, so synod consists of how many? And then also, who else is involved in the synod? from the churches inside of those presbyteries. All right, so what synod did we, synod or synod, it can be pronounced either way. What do we belong to? Alabama Synod. You know how many presbyteries are in the Alabama Synod? 17, 7, how many? 9? All right, let's back up a little bit. Okay, I'm here several different answers. All right, let's break down these courts. All right, let's go to the first court, session. As of today, how many session reps do we have in this church? Representatives, not that go to the, how many session members? There we go. How many session members do we have in this church? Sure? Who said 14? All right, Wayne, talk to him. He said 14. Now, why is it 14? Talk to him. Wayne, I wish I had a prize again. I got some candy. You want some candy? But while I'm getting your candy, Wayne, tell them why it's 14 members. Listen up, y'all. Absolutely. Remember the session. You want some candy? Some candy. The session, you're right, we have, as of today, we have 13 elders, but the pastor, the minister in charge, also is a member of the session. So it's kind of a trick question. So we have 14 members of the session. All right, next quarter. Which is the next quarter? Presbytery. Now, how many churches do we have in the Huntsville Presbytery? 19. All right. I will give you some candy, Wilford, but everybody kind of chimed in on that. You got to rise above everybody. All right, so now we got 19 churches in the Huntsville Presbytery. Now, Alabama Synod. Anybody know how many synods we have? I did tell y'all this. Once, twice, we close. We have 6. Have 6. We were close. We were close. Can anybody name them now that you know that there's 6? You already, and you a member of it. You don't. She said Huntsville and Decatur. She already out. All right, we got Huntsville Presbytery. All right, we got Tennessee Valley Presbytery. Florence Presbytery. Birmingham Presbytery, Tuscaloosa Presbytery, and then South Alabama Presbytery. Okay? So there are 6 presbyteries inside of the Alabama Synod. Okay? All right. Huntsville Presbytery, Tennessee Valley, Florence, Birmingham, Tuscaloosa, South Alabama. All right. Does anybody know which is the largest Presbyterian synod? Are you sure? Absolutely. Huntsville is the largest. All right. Everybody got that? So it's comprised of all of those churches inside of each individual presbytery. Okay? Also, every ordained minister, basically in the state of Alabama now, because each ordained minister would belong to a presbytery. So all the ordained ministers in the state of Alabama are members of the Alabama Synod. That includes you. All right, so all the ministers are a part of it, but who else? Elder representatives of what? Say it again, Elder Ritter. So every church in the state of Alabama ought to have representation at the synod level. All right, some may have 1, some may have 2. I think 2 is the max. Is that the numbers we read? 2 is the max, I believe. Okay? So that's what comprises the Alabama Synod. All right, any questions on that? The rest of this chapter talks about some synodical type work. It just basically repeats the work at the presbytery level. Really, all you really need to know about the synod, it's really a review court. It really reviews actions that were taken at the presbytery level, which reviews actions taken at the church level. And if there's a need for some action, they will make recommendations depending upon what it calls for. Yes, sir? An appeal court. That's a good way to look at it. Like our judicial system, it would be the appeal court. Okay? Any other questions or comments about the synod? All right, we're going to move right along to the General Assembly. That's all I have for synod. General Assembly is on the next page. 54 in my book. What is it in the big one? 55, okay, 9.0. All right, numerically, which court is this? This is the fourth and the final court, okay? All right, somebody read 9.1.
The General Assembly is the highest authority of this church and represents in one body all who take the church thereof. It bears the title of the General Assembly of the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, Cumberland Presbyterian Church in America, and constitutes the bond of union, peace, correspondence, and mutual confidence among all its churches in Judea.
All right. I already mentioned that it holds the title of General Assembly of the Cumberland Presbyterian Church, Cumberland Presbyterian Church in America. What's the difference between Cumberland Presbyterian Church, Cumberland Presbyterian Church in America? So, us and them, like, y'all crazy. At least y'all know the difference. That's the main thing. All right. Is there a distinction between the government of those two churches? Both use the same book. Okay, they are actually on this one. There are some. I don't want to confuse y'all, but do you want to name one simple one that we can talk about without confusing everybody? Yeah, it's not major enough to really discuss. And if it is a difference, if you look in your book, this is what it will look like. Underneath 9.2, on the left side, it makes the provisions for the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. On the right side, it makes the provisions as it pertains to that matter for the CPCA Church. That's the only time they vary into their own individual government procedures for whatever that is, and that's just for 9.2. And it's talking about representation. They tend to have larger churches, so the representation is a little bit different than ours. So that's a distinction being made there. Okay. Other than that, the government structure is the same. The officers, all of it is still the same. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? Let's look on page. Well, in this book, it's page 55, the first paragraph on 55. So that would be 9.2. That section there. It says an elder must be serving. Somebody read that little paragraph.
An elder must be serving as a member of a session at the time of the meeting of the General Assembly in order to be eligible to serve as a commissioner.
All right, let me back up and tell you, a commissioner is the representatives that attend the General Assembly. Okay? Who elects the commissioners to send to the General Assembly? Let's talk about that. Do you know that? Presbytery. Very good. So each presbytery elects commissioners made up of that presbytery body to send as representatives for that presbytery which represents those local churches. Okay, and they're called commissioners. All right, so this says that in order to be a commissioner, you have to be an elder, a member of the session at the time of the meeting of the General Assembly. What does that mean? Aren't all members of the session members of the session? So what did that mean? What does that mean? Why would they make the distinction that you have to be serving as a member of a session at the time of the meeting of the General Assembly? Anybody know? Say that again. All right, she said maybe you got some retired elders. That could be a possibility. Permission. Now, this is stating that in order to qualify to be a commissioner, you must be currently serving as a member of a session at that time. And there's a reason why that distinction is being made. That's what I'm trying to get to. And the reason, I heard somebody.
Maybe you have elders that are inactive.
Okay. What could make them inactive? You're right, but what could make them inactive? I think we're missing what I want. What were you saying? Their health. That was some reasons that could be a reason, but the disciplinary is one. But it seems foreign to us because we have elders that have continuous terms. But there are some churches, remember what I told you, that have rotating terms. So if your term has ended as an elder, then you're no longer eligible to be elected as a commissioner. That's basically what this is talking about. So you must currently be serving as a member of the session at that time in order to be eligible to be a commissioner. So let's say you're at a church where your term expires in May of next year. Right now you're a member of the session, but by the time that meeting takes place, would you be an eligible member? No, your term would have ended. So that's basically what that's speaking to. And I just want to reference that because not every church operates the same way as Blackburn Chapel. So if somebody else has some procedures in place, it may not necessarily be wrong as long as they're abiding by what this is stating. Okay? Yes, sir.
One of the things that to go to the General Assembly, you have to be a representative of your church.
That's correct. Absolutely. What he's saying is, I told you here at Blackburn Chapel, how many representatives can we send from our session to Presbytery? We can send 2. So who served this year? You and Goshay?
Goshay.
All right, so they represented Blackburn Chapel this year at the Presbytery. So they were eligible to be commissioners to the General Assembly for 2019. The previous year, it was you and Tom or somebody. Burrow, may have been Burrow. So basically, whoever was elected from that church is the only people who could go, which means that Elder Scruggs and Elder Reddick couldn't go to the General Assembly as a commissioner because they were not representatives of Blackburn Chapel for that term. Does that make sense? You can go anytime, but you can't be a voting party or have a voice on the floor if you're not actually an elected commissioner. Okay? Does that make sense? Good point. All right, any other questions or comments? Yes.
I know you can go to Presbytery anytime you want to, but are you allowed to sit in on any meeting that you choose to as a member?
All right, that's a good question. Anybody want to answer that before I do? All right, I hear some saying, All right, let me make it clear to you. Technically, yes, you can sit in on any court session at any time. You cannot vote, you cannot speak, but there are some matters, like say if you came to a session meeting, there are some matters of the church that you could and should be asked to be excused from because it is business that pertains to the sensitivity of what's needed for that session. So, was that? Right, so in theory, yeah, you can come as a spectator and as just to see what's going on, but you may not be able to have an active part of every particular part of the business that has to take place. But at the Presbytery, Synod, any of those, you're welcome to go. And when you get there, they will designate spots for certain people. If you're a commissioner or delegate, you'll be asked to sit in a certain place. And if you're visiting, you don't have any expectation to get any information beyond what you can hear with your ears. They might share with you, but they don't have to. And if you speak, you're out of turn and you can be asked to leave as well. Okay? A good question. All right, any other questions, comments? All right. That's pretty much all I wanted to cover. General Assembly. Again, I hope you have been reading through this. If you have questions about something or something you wanted to come up, discuss, you're welcome to. Remisha, go ahead.
What's the purpose of the General Assembly?
What's the purpose?
Yes.
All right, good question. What is the purpose of the General Assembly? Exactly. Remember what I gave you, the executive, legislative, and judicial. Which one would that be? The General Assembly. Executive. Why is it the executive? That's where all the laws are basically made. That's where all the business of the church is decided on, final, and then sent back to the previous courts for execution. So that's the decision-making court of our church. Okay? Good question. Any other questions or comments?
So basically, we say, or the people say what they would like to have done, and it has to go all the way up there to the assembly to get approved to be done in each area.
Correct, pretty much. If it's anything, these things have already been established, so they're eligible to be executed upon. If any changes are needed, it has to be sent up the proper chains. And if it reaches, some stuff can be resolved at the lower courts. But if it proceeds past the lower courts, it would eventually reach the General Assembly. And then there are some things that will go straight to the General Assembly, basically, because it will go through those channels, but they know immediately it needs to be referred up. But at the end of the day, yeah, the decisions are made there and then sent back through the commissioners to the courts, the clerks and all of that, to be carried out by the people. Okay, yes ma'am.
If something does have to go up the chain to the General Assembly level, how long does it take before a response is?
It varies. I mean, do we know how often the General Assembly meets? Right, exactly. This states you have to meet a minimum of 2 years. We typically meet every year. But like he's stating, there are executive board meetings going on throughout the year, so actions can be discussed if it's needed, if it's urgent at that particular meeting. If it's something that requires action from the entire body, a call, General Assembly can be called if it's before the expected meeting time. So if it's an urgent matter, it can be handled pretty quickly, but if it's something that they think can be handled at the General Assembly, you probably would get a response following the end of the General Assembly session. Okay. Any other questions?
Would you say allowing the ordained minister to become a member of the church, is that urgent?
Say that again?
Allowing the ordained minister to become a member of the church, would you deem that urgent? We could get it rushed up?
You set it up if you want to, you're going to be on your own. Need help, y'all. Y'all pray for me. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Paragraph 9.4 says, the General Assembly has oversight responsibility. That's 8 over, so that's 7.
Right.
So you've addressed most of those, but they want to get specifics.
Right.
That read that section,
Yep.
you see
You-
all of them.
They kind of deal with it.
Assembly has responsibility.
Yep, he's right. 9.4 highlights almost in detail each specific thing that they are responsible for. And each section does this. Synod would have had a similar checklist, and each one would have. I just didn't spend time going through each one. But it gives you the specifics of what they typically do at each General Assembly meeting. And of course, any other business that comes across the desk or to the attention of the moderator or the executive board would be handled at that level as well. Okay, good point, Elder Ray. Any other questions or comments? Okay. All right, so that's pretty much, like I said, what I wanted to cover there. Again, this is yours to read through. The next section would be the appendices. These are different letters and templates that can be used to carry out particular actions if you need to change churches or you hear people say you got a letter coming by letter or whatever. If your church needs a template for a letter, it's right here in this book they can go by. All right. Also for probationers and ministers, those types of things are here. If you want to call a pastor or assistant pastor, those types of things are in that section. All right, starting on page 64 would be the rules of discipline. I'm not going to spend time going through those here at this meeting, but if there are disciplinary actions that are needed in the church, this would be the guideline that would be used to handle those matters. Just a quick scenario. Let's say Sister Hall and Jalikia are at odds, and they can't get along. What should happen from this church? What should take place? What y'all say? Give me a biblical confession of faith answer, please. What would be the appropriate action, and what should happen? Somebody help me with that. Who should call them together? By this book, who should call them together? Who should have a meeting? What should happen by the book? Anybody know? Say the session, okay? And the pastor, okay? All right. What? Anybody else got something different? Absolutely. How would they have to do it though? All right. Can't just do your own thing. Say y'all meet me after church. That's not how it goes down. It's to your benefit. If you have an issue, to see either your session rep or a session rep. Make them aware of the issue, then they are to then take the appropriate actions to make sure that there's order so that things don't get out of order. Does that make sense? And then they would subsequently handle it according to what the rules of discipline would require. And if you read the rules of discipline, it does not lead itself to just go after accusations. It's a due process that allows people to speak to the issue equally and then decisions are made based on what the information says and not what people say. Does that make sense? So it's a very thorough process, and if it's done correctly, it should get the end result, which is resolution. Let's do this. I don't want to read a lot of it, but on page 64, let's look at 2.0. Let's move back up to 1.2 first. Let's start there. I do want to give y'all a little bit more just so you'll know, just in case you need to know. Somebody read 1.2 first. Talk about discipline in the church.
Discipline in the church should be appropriate to the nature of the error or offense. All actions of discipline, both for individual and judicial, should be weighed carefully, keeping in mind the purpose of discipline.
1.3.
Various purposes of discipline have the same purpose and generally should begin with counseling, and only then proceed to the more severe approaches.
So basically, going back to that scenario, it should begin with counseling. Counseling of who? The two parties and nobody else. Okay? And then if there's a need to go to a different approach, then that would be the next step. All right, keep going, Dwayne.
Discipline may be trust. Discipline may include, but not limited to the following. Counseling is effort to encourage and assist the person or judiciary to correct what is wrong, to remedy deficiency, and to learn to grow spiritually and spiritually. Admonition of the formal action to identify the need for the sake or offensive person or judiciary, and to urge the order of discretion. Suspension of a member of the church is temporary exclusion from the right to vote in congregational meeting and the removal of any position of leadership through the session and the act. For a minister, it is a temporary probation against the performance of the duties of the office. For a judiciary, it is a temporary withdrawal of its power to act and denial of representation in higher judiciary. Suspension may be for a definite or indefinite period of time.
All right. So that highlights different levels of suspension. Is there any person, officer, or individual inside of the church that's above the law? Not at all. There are levels of suspension and consequences for any person that is found to be working against what this would entail us to do. Okay? If they're gone through the proper channels. Yes, ma'am.
So let's say you did something.
Okay.
How would that go as far as procedure of police officers?
What would be the steps? If the pastor is in error on something, what are the appropriate steps to get the right action? Still the session. That issue starts at the session level. Cannot be resolved at the session level. It's then referred to the presbytery, not to the committee on ministry. It's referred to the presbytery, and then they will then decide which umbrella it needs to carry it out, whether it's the judiciary, committee on ministry, executive board, whatever. But that's the next step. And if it cannot be resolved at the presbytery level, where does it go next? If it can't be resolved there, where does it go next? And then the actions would come from that. Okay? Any questions or comments on that? Does that answer the question? Okay. Just because there is an offense in the session don't mean you bypass the session. It still is the session, because the session is not one person. The session is comprised of several individuals, and sometimes it can be resolved there. Okay. Good question. All right, let's look at 2.0, 2.1.
Responsibility and authority for discipline in a particular church belongs to the session.
Read that again.
The responsibility and authority for discipline in a particular church belongs to the session.
Not to people. If someone in your organization is at fault, you should not try to handle it yourself. Amen, somebody?
Amen.
If prevents you from getting caught up into something. If they're in the wrong, let it be referred to the proper channel to give you the support and help you need to get the right action. Okay, because your intention may be good, but you may not be able to get it done the right way and it end up becoming a bigger problem. All right, let's keep going.
Oversight of children of the church belongs first to their parents, but the session is responsible to give support to parents as they lead and guide children in their spiritual formation.
What does that mean? All right, what you got? Okay, say that again. Let me make sure I heard you right. Okay, session. Talking about the session? Okay. All right, anybody else?
It's train up a child. So we at home train them up, and then the session, just like everyone else, basically helps to rear as they're developing the church.
Right. It's basically saying that the session should not try to run somebody's household, but they should be an aid and a help to parents who are training their children. A support. And some parents aren't training their kids. Amen. So it is the church's responsibility to help. Still, that's not your jurisdiction to go into somebody's house and dictate what happens there. However, when they come to the church, you can help govern the church the way the church needs to be governed. Does that make sense? But for a parent or a home that is trying to do the right thing, then the session becomes an aid and a help to them and not a hindrance to try to prevent them from parenting their kids, okay? All right, questions or comments? Let's keep going.
The action by the session to admonish or suspend a member shall be taken only with respect to serious offenses, and then only after full opportunity is given for the approach of counseling.
That's key. After opportunity has been given for counseling. No one should take any drastic action before someone has been given an opportunity to at least be counseled on it and try to work through it, okay? A lot of times people are so gung-ho or hurt or upset about what has happened, they want to get people suspended or kicked off or whatever. That might be what needs to happen, but we need to do it the right way, and that's what this tells us to do, okay? All right, does it make sense? Questions, comments? All right, let's keep going.
Removal of an elder from the session or a deacon from the diaconate may be accompanied by deposition from office.
Everybody know what deposition is? What's a deposition?
Agree that person's position is either paused temporarily or they've been terminated from that particular time.
Okay. What is it as it pertains to this? What is a deposition? A written what? You're right. Document. That documents, well, what does it document?
That supports
The questions and the answers of.
We get this position, and there's two person can get, this one person can get one person.
It typically, what a deposition is, I've been deposed. As an investigator, you depose quite often. Sometimes you don't want to be. And I have worked in a lawyer's office. What it is it is a record, a written record that explains every conversation had, the questions asked and the responses of the parties that are being questioned. And it provides a record of what each person has stated to be used for fact-finding. That's basically what it is. So it's a detailed record, a written record of the conversation about an incident that provides the means for getting an appropriate action. Does that make sense? So that's what a deposition is. It can be, as it pertains here, it can be about an issue that has happened on a session or diaconate, but that's what it would be, is a written record of the conversation. So if someone was deposed by the session, there should be someone there that is not involved that records detail every word. If you say ain't, they should write ain't. You get what I'm saying? Every single word that's stated, so that at the end of the meeting and the fact finding, that would be the record, not based on what I thought they said. No, not what you thought. What did they say? And that's what it's for. Okay? Does that make sense?
So for
Absolutely. And it is law, is binding, just like what you would give in court. You're sworn in and everything. It's intimidating. It's kind of scary if you because you want to make sure you represent yourself right. Okay, but that's what it is. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, let's read 2.2 and then we can move on.
The responsibility and authority for the discipline of ministers in churches, presbytery, to which they belong.
Well, let me clear that up. That's basically talking about ordained ministers. Well, it's talking about both ministers. Ordained ministers, their actions would be decided by who? Presbytery. Licentiates or probationers, their decisions would be decided by who? Church session and the presbytery, but church session first. Okay, does that make sense? So when it says ministers, that's kind of, we want to make sure we give life to what it's talking about. All right, let's keep going.
The action by the presbytery to admonish, suspend, or depose shall be taken only with respect to serious offenses, and then only after full opportunity is given for the approach of counsel.
All right, so it basically just duplicates the same process spoken. It just tells you it's done at the presbytery level. Okay, so the rest of it just gives more details. The discipline of the people begins on the next page, and it talks about the disciplinary hearings that could take place at the session level or whatever. So it highlights it in detail if you need specifics on that. The next section after the rules of discipline would be the directory of worship. That's at the end. It just provides guidelines and templates for the order of worship that's appropriate for a CPC and CPCA church. Various dimensions of it. You'll see some of the things we do constantly, and then you'll see some of the things that we've done as far as when we have our CPCA service or when we've gone to our sister churches. So you'll see some of the creeds and different things that are appropriate for a CPCA church or CPC church. Also, it gives instructions to choirs and musicians and so forth so that they can support the worship experience that's expected upon by the leadership of that church. Just because someone is a worship leader or a musician doesn't mean that they should be operating on their own agenda. They should be supporting the overall worship expectation and experience that's been established by the pastor and the leaders of that church. That's important. I wish my musicians was here to hear this. It's very important that there is a harmony and a unity that flows throughout the whole worship service. It's very important because that's one of the tools that the enemy can and will use to stifle the experience of God's people reaching him, is if he can disrupt worship. Okay? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah. Right.
How do you go about doing that with a church you don't know anything about?
You consult your session, your church session. You make them aware of what you would like to do, what fellowship you would like to participate in. And then the session would do diligence to make sure that in that experience that there can be unity and the support to enhance what we're doing and that somebody didn't believe opposite of us. Now, you can find that out yourself before if you want to, but it's still proper and appropriate to make sure that it goes through the session first. But we fellowship with all types of denominations all the time, so it can happen, and to me, we all believe in the same God, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. However, not everybody believes that. And not everybody has worship experiences that support what we're trying to do. So Nah.
You know, well, I just know coming up that I've always wondered how, you know, with different church organizations, fellowship with somebody else that is not really close
Yeah.
to the Presbyterian.
Right.
That.
Yeah. No, there's nothing wrong with it in and of itself, but there should still always be a continuity for your church. And what I mean by that is you should not consistently seek fellowships with people that are completely opposite of you. It can cause confusion in your house. Okay, so you have to be cautious about it, but it can be done. So, Russell? In a what? In their church? Let them stand on their own. She said her question is, if a church has confusion in their church, I guess you know that they do, should you allow them to come and worship with you, or should you let them stay in their own confused state? What y'all say about that? Real talk. This is kind of what I was talking about here. This is real, for real. It's very important, especially as leaders, but really for anybody in your church, to recognize the spiritual warfare is real. Okay? And spiritual contaminants can enter into your house any way, in any fashion. So if you're aware of potential dangers, you should steer those dangers away so that it does not pollute what you're trying to stay connected with in God. Does that give enough answer to help you understand what I'm saying? So if you're aware of an issue, why would you allow an issue to come and be a part of your church? Now, if you're not, sometimes you don't know what's going on, but you can still sense it. So if you experience something that is spiritually disruptive to what you know to be true in God, you need to make sure that you seek God on ways to cleanse that and get it out and to remove it so that it doesn't fester and become something that keeps you distant from God. Because unfortunately, everybody that's just crying, Lord, Lord, they ain't for real, y'all. So you have to be cautious. Okay? Yes.
That's what we ask. We invite a minister, a church, a church is coming to our church, that you bring before the session.
Right.
So that if we know of any problem within that church, or know anything the minister is preaching that is contrary to what we believe, that we can address it.
That's correct. All right, Ramesh, were you going to say something?
But yeah, I just had a question about the worship thing. I didn't see like the invitations. Is it stated something else in the Presbyterian? I mean, I know we call it the invitation to discipleship, but is it like, I didn't see it on here.
I haven't looked through each one of these in detail. Sometimes it's called, on CPCA programs, it's a part of the word reflection or whatever it is. I'm trying to see how they worded it. Give me a specific one you're looking at, and I can tell you.
So I looked through all of them, because it's on page 99, 100 of the big book, but if you mention reflection, that's.
Sometimes, I mean, it can be titled different things. Reflection on the word, or prayer of illumination is something different. But anyway, it's titled different things, but there should always be an opportunity to have a response to it. I think in most of them, that's what it's called. The people respond to the word is what it's called a lot of times. But it should always be given an opportunity to respond to the word once the word is given. And that's what an invitation really is. That's usually what it's called. I don't see it in here, but a lot of times I see it called the response to the word. The people respond to the word. The people make their confession of God. They call it different things like that. Okay. Are any other questions or comments? All right, and then the last section would be the rules of order. And that tells you about the moderator, vice moderator, the clerks, and all the different judicatories and their responsibilities as it pertains to that particular office, okay? I'm not going to go over those, but they're there for you to know how to handle those if you're ever elected, and also it gives you the election procedures for those offices, okay? So that's a brief, believe it or not, even though it took us 4 weeks, I think, that's a brief overview of this confession of faith. It could be more detailed, but I hope it kind of gives us an idea of what the expectations are as officers, because Sunday, I'm going to talk about that before we close out, we'll be electing new officers. I did promise y'all we would go over briefly the mothers or the godly women, so somebody help me get these passed out real quick. We may not have time to go over all of it, but you'll at least have it. Not you. Y'all see how bad she be acting? She ain't supposed to be up doing stuff. Put you in
And
time
doing
now.
that class, I see where, she was talking about, the invitation.
Uh-huh.
And I see it, public profession of faith,
Yeah.
and then asking questions, and then, right before that, transfer of membership, reaffirmation of faith. So I know
That's everybody.
and people flipping through.
Okay. Yeah, it would be in there. I'd have to look at each one and pick up, because they give different orders of particular things in a worship service to give you different things to choose from. So it's in there somewhere.
Liturgical rites and occasional worship.
Okay. So yeah, you can look through there and you can find what you're looking for, but it's in there and it will give you just different guidelines to go by. Okay. This is taken out of our denominational Built by the Hands book. It was a history book that was written, it's been about 20 years now. We need to update it. But it gives a complete history of our church from when it began all the way up until the current time in year 2000. On this page, it was page 60 at the bottom. You'll see it says the godly women, formerly known as mothers. Let's read a little bit here, and it goes on the back here. So somebody start reading that paragraph there. Let's find out about mothers. Keep going. Somebody or Cindy, you keep reading, or somebody read the next paragraph, please. Yes. Well, those are two different things. Well, and that's, in the churches I know of, there are two different things. A deaconess is just a female deacon. But they're, okay. I don't know about that one. Anybody know about Seventh-day Adventist Church? I'm not sure. So I don't know. It could very well be, or the expectation of the duties could be the same or something. But I know in most Baptists and most churches like that, if you have a deaconess, it's just a female deacon. And they have mothers as well in most of those churches. So I'm not sure. That's a good question. I'll have to find that one out. So I guess it's possible. Okay. Where will we stop at? Okay, yeah, this is a letter that was submitted to the 105th meeting of General Assembly in 1979 as it pertains to the mother. So let's read a little bit of that, and let's go ahead and read it. All right, this letter was submitted then, and as far as I know, this was the last official action taken as it pertains to what we've always called the Mother's Board. Do y'all know of anything else that has taken place? That was, what, 40 years ago? But this was the last action taken at the General Assembly level as it pertains to the Mother's Board, okay? Let's read that paragraph underneath it, and I'll explain what all of it means. All right, first of all, so let me ask y'all this. Is the Mother's Board a leadership in the church? Is it a part of the government of the church, I should say? No. How are the mothers elected then? Did y'all see that? They're not even elected. Exactly. That was a trick question. So the appointed. What's the difference between being elected and appointed? Exactly. If you're appointed to something, you're asked to just fill that capacity. There's no official title or anything given to it. It's just basically another way to serve and to volunteer for your church. Does that make sense? So that is to be decided upon by the session. They can appoint and call away people as well. Okay? Any questions on that? And it also begins to talk to you about some of the duties of the godly women. All right, let's keep going.
Such an organization is the Mother's Board, which by action of the 1979 General Assembly now may be called the Godly Women.
All right, let me stop right there. It says it may be called godly women. So what's the right name?
God.
Is that the only name? Sure? Even though this, what? Y'all talk to me. What you say? Not official. Now, the official action was to change it to godly women, but this, the way it's written, is that they may be called godly women or they may be called mothers. It's not really it's not a big deal to me. It's not, to me, you pick your battles, that's not a big enough battle to just fight about. But it does let you know that at the General Assembly level, they're looked at as godly women as a form of what their actions would entail that they do. Does that make sense? All right, let's keep going. Yes.
Okay, so when it says it was agreed that section 23 under the profession of faith be changed, if it was agreed, doesn't it make it
right.
So
The technical term by the confession should be godly women, but what I'm saying is, if you see what it's stating here, if some people still happen to call them mothers, you ain't got to kick them out of church.
right.
You get what I'm saying? But yes, if you want it to be proper by what the letter of the law, it should be godly women. That's what it should be. But a lot of people have been steeped in tradition so much that they've allowed provisions for them to still call them that, so if they choose, but if they want to do it right, it should be godly women.
Yeah, like the elder being called, elder versus pastor being called a pastor. Like some people still call pastors elders.
Right, yeah. There are some churches that still call pastors elders, and so that's the same difference.
Okay.
It's the same difference, yeah. All right, let's keep going.
The Godly Women are women formed to an organization that is comprised of committed Christian women who are faithful to God and His Son, Jesus Christ, and who faithfully carry out the duties and responsibilities they are assigned. The traditional uniform of the ladies was called the deaconess dress. It was a white dress or suit, white apron, white shoes, white gloves, and white blanket or hat.
Y'all remember that? Keep going.
In the later years, some continued to wear the traditional uniform, but in the 90s, too many elected to wear modern styles and colorful hats. Suits or dresses of many colors and stylish shoes of many colors are now being worn. The traditional white platform closed-toe shoe and the white apron are rarely seen today.
All right, let's keep going.
Congregations still prefer the white uniform on Sunday due to numerous issues of baptisms before. However, not all congregations adopt such position. Presently, those congregations that utilize the ministry of the godly women allow them to function in this manner. A, to assist the pastor in preparations for the ministry of community. B, to assist the pastor and elders with visiting the sick and for sharing the sacrament of the
No
the
church.
church. And to constantly witness for Jesus Christ wherever possible. Each to assist the pastor prepare the candidates effectively.
All right, so that's still basically the role of our mothers here. We have what, 2 mothers in here right now. Did y'all say that still encompasses pretty much what the duties are today? Okay. And we have some dedicated ladies that serve in that capacity. So I just want you to know the history behind it, how we got where we are, and more importantly, the distinction, because some people do actually believe that they're part of the government of the church, and they're really not. So it kind of keeps us aware of the proper channels to make sure that actions are being done right in the church. And then at the bottom here, if we had time, I would read that. It just gives you some of the pioneers in our church. Reverend Elizabeth Ross was the first woman to receive her Master's of Divinity. Our very own Reverend India Scruggs is the first female moderator in General Assembly. And y'all know that's Elder Scruggs' wife. Amen, hallelujah. And then Dr. Herring was the first female state clerk, and she's the first one to receive her Doctor of Ministry degree. So they're considered pioneers in the church, in our church, and we try to honor them and reverence them and appreciate them for their service to the church. All right, any other questions about the godly women?
So it's not in the profession of faith, but it's faith.
No. Mothers and godly women are not in the profession of faith. No, not at all. And that's why I wanted you to see this. They're not officially a part of the church. However, they are part of our history. So in the history, y'all get what I'm saying? It don't mean y'all don't matter. It's just saying that when this is government related. If anything, y'all should be glad y'all ain't got to be a part of this, because there's a lot of headaches that come along with this. So you're not tied to having to make decisions and have responsibilities in the government structure of the church, but they did want to reverence the fact that they have a big part in the makings of our church, and that's why they put the history and the understanding of what it is in our history book, so that we have a record of it. Okay? All right, anything else? Sunday is Installation Sunday. Now, I don't know what I may tie up a few loose ends as far as the class next week, because I wanted to give y'all some more scenarios of potential problems that we come across in the church and how it should be solved and alleviated. But Sunday is our installation service. To those that are preparing to be installed and ordained, we're asking you to wear black and white as the color, primary color being black. If you want to wear white shirts or white blouses or whatever. You can invite your family and friends, whatever you want to do as far as that. It will still be a part of our morning worship service. There will be a special time designated for it, but when that time comes, you'll be instructed upon what you should do. I do ask that on that Sunday, try to sit close to the front, so that when we are ready for that, you'll be somewhat pretty close to where we all will be. And
Yes, sir.
what's that? All right, you just affirming it? Okay.
Sitting in the back all the time.
Is it in the back? Well, you can call forward. Come out from among them and be ye separate. You're going to be amongst the front of the church now. Any other particular directions we need to give towards them? But above all else, take your calling and your opportunities serious. That goes for all of us. It's more than just what comes a part of our name. It's about what we should be doing in our heart for God. And this church, we're blessed to have good leaders in place. We just want to continue a rich tradition of great leadership and be able to train towards the future and be even more effective at what we're already trying to do for the Lord. So we appreciate y'all being willing to serve. We appreciate the church for supporting them. And let's just come ready to have a good time on Sunday. Amen? Amen. Any other announcements or remarks?
Didn't you forget something?
What did I forget?
Supposed to report after Saturday night for the test for candidates. They're gonna have a test.
Oh, well, that test. Oh, the surprise test. Yeah, you're right about that. No, she's trying to mess y'all up. We're going to do that Sunday morning. How about that? We do it Sunday morning. I mean, I should have done that. I should have done a pop quiz. All right. Any other announcements or anything that we need to talk about? We do have a call session meeting tomorrow, y'all, at 6 o'clock. So I just want to make that announcement.
Time falls back on Sunday night or Saturday night.
Yeah. be late for church.
We won't be here.
We won't be here. Elder Peterson.
Also, to that, for Sunday, I think we had one that was dressed in outfit.
Yes. All officers, elders and deacons also, current elders and deacons, that's all wear black and white. All of our officers. That's correct. Good point. Anything else? All right. Nothing else. We can start preparing now to be dismissed. Any prayer requests or praise reports? Oh, I do have candy. I did bring y'all some candy. All right. But you got to have Bible verse. There's no trick or treat. You say trick or treat, I got something else for you. But you get some candy on your way out. Okay. Any prayer requests or praise reports?
I have a prayer request.
Mm-hmm.
That we remember all those families that are suffering from loss of loved ones, especially the family I forgot the state is in prayer. The family member lost their three children in a bus accident. So please keep them in prayer and lift them up.
Absolutely.
Yes, has to be a heavy burden to carry.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Okay. Okay. All right. Our condolences and our prayers to them. Anybody else? Well, we say it all the time, we're familiar with the power of prayer, and it is good for us to be concerned and mindful of other people, especially when they're in their seasons and their moments of weakness. We can be a strength through God for people who don't have strength. And then the beautiful thing about it, when you give, it's given back to you. There will be seasons when we all have time and situations where we need help. And God will be faithful to provide that for you in your time of need. God, we thank you tonight for your faithfulness. We thank you for your love. We thank you for your presence. And Lord, we thank you for the power of your word. We thank you for teaching us your truths and teaching us the way in which we should go according to your will and your way. And we pray that you continue to open our mind and our hearts to more understanding of how to be great stewards of your kingdom resources and how to be effective leaders and people inside of your church. Lord, we thank you for these that have become leaders now in our church, those who have served faithfully for many years, and those that are preparing now to begin a new journey in you. We pray that you guide us all by your hand of wisdom, Lord, and allow us to be great leaders that realize we can't do anything without you. And if we humble ourselves, you can do great and mighty things in us and through us. Lord, we thank you for the things that we're learning here in these Bible study sessions, and we pray that we continue to grow stronger and stronger in you. We now lift up, Lord, those names that have been mentioned, those that we have on our mind and in our hearts that are in their different situations, their beds of affliction and their valley experiences where they may not feel close or connected to anyone in particular, Lord. Lord, be a source of strength and a comfort and be everything that they stand in need of. Touch and heal and make whole situations that only you can handle, Lord God. Please be with bereaved families, Lord God, and be the comfort that they need to be able to walk through this period of time, knowing that you are yet still with them and that you promise to never leave or forsake them. Lord, we thank you for the many times in our own lives, Lord, you proved faithful and proven to be right by us in our different situations. Lord, now as we prepare to leave this place, God, we pray for your grace and your mercy upon us, and we pray that you see us all safely to our different destinations. We thank you for everything that's been said and done, and we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.